Seraphine Voss learned early that silence was the safest place to live. Not the silence of someone with nothing to say. The silence of someone who had learned, slowly, that her words landed like stones in still water. They made a small ripple, and then the water closed over them, and it was as if the stones had never existed. She had been mated to Kale Dravon for 3 years. 3 years of palace mornings where she woke alone. 3 years of dinners where she sat at a table long enough to seat 40, with the man she was bound to at the other end of it, his attention aimed at everyone except her. 3 years of sleeping in a room that smelled like cedarwood and cold sheets, and the very specific loneliness that comes from being invisible to someone who is supposed to see you most. She had stopped crying in the 2nd year, not because the pain had left, because she had run out of places to put it. The night everything ended, she was not even the one who had been insulted. Not loudly, anyway. Not in a way that anyone watching would have pointed to and said, "There." That was the moment. That was the wound. It was a council dinner, 40 people at a long oak table, candles, the best dishes, political conversation that moved like slow water, deliberate and careful. Seraphine said something about the Eastern Border Trade Agreements. She had been reading about them for weeks, quietly, the way she did everything, gathering information in the margins of her life, thinking about it carefully before she spoke. Kale did not look at her when she spoke. He waited until her sentence was finished, and then he simply redirected the conversation toward the council member on his left, as if her voice had been a soft noise from somewhere outside the window. Not worth interrupting, not worth acknowledging, simply not worth. She finished her meal. She walked to their room. She sat on the edge of the bed, and she waited for the feeling to arrive. The familiar tight burn behind her eyes, the pressure in her chest, the proof that she was still someone who could be hurt. Nothing came, just a quiet that was different from all the other quiets, deeper, still. She sat in that stillness for a long time. She visited Marin the next morning. Marin was a healer who lived in the lower quarter of the palace grounds, in a house that always smelled of dried herbs and something warm on a stove. She was the only person in the kingdom who spoke to Seraphine as if Seraphine were the most important person in the room, not out of flattery, but out of the simple decision to pay attention. Seraphine sat at Marin's table and did not say much for a while. Marin did not rush her. Finally, Seraphine said, "I feel nothing." Marin looked at her carefully. "When did that start?" "Last night. He spoke over me in front of the entire council." A pause. It was not the first time, but something was different last night. What was different? Seraphine thought about it honestly. I was not surprised. Marin set down her cup. She did not say anything for a moment. Then, quietly, "You didn't lose yourself in one day, you know. It happened one small thing at a time." Seraphine nodded. "Are you going to stay?" The question sat between them simply. No weight added to it, no judgment underneath it, just the question. Seraphine looked at her hands on the table. She thought about the past 3 years, not the dramatic moments, because there had been very few dramatic moments. She thought about the small ones. The cold shoulder after she disagreed in private. The way he looked through her, in rooms full of people. The birthdays that passed like ordinary days. The particular silence of a man who had simply decided, somewhere along the way, that she did not require effort. "No," she said. It came out steady. Marin reached across the table and pressed her hand briefly. "Good." She completed the release rite alone, the night before she left. It was an old ceremony, not complicated. A small cut on her palm, a few words spoken into the dark of a room, lit only by a single candle. The formal severing of the bond she had never asked to share in the first place. Her blood on the page of an old book. Her name written twice. Once to confirm she had been bound, once to confirm she had chosen to be free. She did not feel the bond break so much as feel the absence of a weight she had grown so used to, that she had stopped noticing it was there. She packed one bag. She did not write a note. She walked out at dawn, when the palace grounds were gray and silent, and the morning was just beginning to consider becoming a day. The gates were not locked from the inside. She let herself out. She did not look back. There were no tears. Not because she did not feel anything, but because she had finally understood something important. Her grief had been the last chain. She had been staying because leaving felt like giving up on something, and giving up hurt, and she had confused the hurt of leaving with a reason to remain. She was done confusing those two things. Cale came home at midday. He was not the kind of man who hurried through doorways. He moved through rooms the way people move when they are certain the world will pause and wait for them. He had always moved this way. It had never cost him anything, until now. He noticed the room before he consciously understood what was wrong with it. There was a quality to the stillness that was different. He stood in the doorway of their room and looked at the space where her small collection of books had been on the shelf beside the window. The space was clean, empty. The shelf had a faint rectangle of dust around the absence. He called for the steward. The steward came, told him. He stood very still. He went to his council meeting. He sat through 4 hours of border politics and trade reports and the usual complicated machinery of running a kingdom, and he did all of it with the growing understanding behind his ribs that he had done something that could not be undone, and the shape of it was still arriving, slowly, like weather that has been on the horizon all afternoon and is only now reaching you. He had not known. That was what surprised him most. He had not known she was this close to the edge. He turned that over and over. He had seen her every day for 3 years. He had slept in the same room, eaten at the same table, walked the same halls. He had been present, consistently and completely, for every single day that she had grown quieter and more careful and more invisible. He had watched her disappear and mistaken it for peace. He found her 6 weeks later. Not because she had hidden herself. She had not. She had gone to a border town called Ashvale, found work as a record keeper for the trade guild there, and rented a small room above a bread shop. She was not living in hiding. She was living a life. It was small and quiet and entirely hers. He came to the door of her building on a Tuesday afternoon. She answered the door the way people answer the door when they are not afraid of who might be behind it. "Cale," she said. Seraphine. She looked well. That was the first thing he noticed. She had lost the careful watchfulness that had become such a fixed part of her face in the palace that he had stopped seeing it. She looked like someone who slept easily. "Would you like to come in?" she asked, politely, evenly. He came in. She made tea. They sat at a small table in a kitchen that smelled like bread from the shop downstairs. He talked about nothing important for a few minutes, because he had not yet figured out how to say the important things. She listened without filling the silence for him. He left an hour later without having said what he came to say. He came back. And then again. He wrote letters for a while, long ones at first, full of explanations and justifications, and carefully arranged sentences that, he now understood, were more about making himself feel better than actually taking responsibility. She read them. He knew she read them because occasionally she would mention, briefly and neutrally, something small from a letter, the way you mention a fact you found interesting. She never responded to the parts that wanted something from her. He started writing shorter letters, more honest ones. Letters that did not perform remorse, but simply described it. He told her about specific moments he now saw differently: the council dinner, the way he had looked through her at the midsummer feast, the evening he had come home to find her sitting alone in the garden at dusk, and he had walked past her without stopping. She did not respond to these either, but she did not ask him to stop coming. One winter afternoon, he was sitting in the same small kitchen, and he realized something. He was the one waiting now. He turned that over carefully. He thought about the 3 years of their mating, and the particular quiet she had lived in, and the way she had waited at tables and in corridors, and in a room that was supposed to be shared. He thought about how many doors she had held open, and how many times he had walked through them without acknowledgement. He understood, sitting in her small warm kitchen, that he had become the thing he had made her feel. It was not a comfortable understanding. He stayed with it anyway. By the 4th year, he asked for one conversation. Not to argue, not to ask for anything, just to say the things that needed to be said aloud, in her presence, where they could be real. She agreed. They walked along the edge of the river that ran through the south side of Ashvale. It was late autumn. The trees had already let go of most of their leaves. The light was thin and pale, and very honest. the kind of afternoon light that makes everything visible. He talked for a long time. He did not make speeches. He did not use the kind of careful, impressive language that he used in council chambers. He spoke plainly, the way people speak when they are not trying to manage the impression they are making. He told her that he had not understood what he was doing, and that not understanding did not change what he had done. He told her that he had looked at her every day for 3 years and seen a woman who was managing well, and that he had chosen to be satisfied with that because it required nothing of him. He told her about the afternoon he had stood in the doorway of the empty room and felt the weight of the absence, and how that was the first time in years he had actually felt something in connection with her, and how that fact alone told him everything he needed to know about the kind of husband he had been. He did not ask her to come back. She had known somehow that he wouldn't. It was the first time he had wanted something from her and had chosen not to take it. She was quiet for a moment after he finished. "I believe you," she said. "I believe that you see it now." He nodded. "I believed you then too," she said. "When everything you did told me I didn't matter. I believed that." She said it without cruelty, simply as a fact, the way you describe weather that has passed. Both things are true at the same time. That's the part that used to be difficult to hold. It isn't anymore. He looked at the river. "I'm sorry," he said. And then, because he was finally learning to say things without also wanting something in return for saying them, "You don't have to respond to that." She looked at him once, carefully. "I know," she said, and then she walked home. Cale returned to his kingdom. He was a different kind of king, quieter in the ways that mattered. He listened more in council, longer, and with more patience. He asked questions he would previously have considered beneath him. He stopped moving through rooms as if the world would pause for him. The court noticed. Some approved. Some did not trust it. He did not try to explain the change to anyone. He had not changed for the court. He was still alone. Not miserably. He was learning the difference between loneliness and aloneness. The first was about what was missing. The second was simply a state, and states could be lived in honestly without requiring rescue. Seraphine, in the same season, made a friend. Her name was Dora, and she ran the bread shop beneath Seraphine's rooms, and she had a habit of laughing at her own jokes before she finished telling them, which was an entirely lovable quality that Seraphine had not been around in years. Dora introduced her to 2 other women, and the 4 of them began eating dinner together on Friday evenings at a table in the back of the bakery after closing. On one such Friday, in the deep cold of a late winter evening, Dora told a story about her youngest child, and a missing shoe, and a goat, and it was genuinely not a very well-told story, but something about the telling of it, the warmth of the room, the bread on the table, the 3 women around her already laughing, hit Seraphine in a way she had not expected. She laughed. Not the polite, careful laugh she had practiced in palace rooms. Something real, from somewhere lower and warmer. The kind of laugh that surprises you with how much of you it involves. She sat in the warmth of it for a moment after it passed. She thought of nothing difficult, nothing old, nothing lost. She was simply there, on a Friday evening, laughing at a story about a goat. She had not been simply anywhere in a very long time. She did not heal because he changed. He changed because losing her had taught him, finally, the kind of lesson that comfort never teaches. He was better for it. She was glad he was better, in the distant, neutral way that she wished most people to be better. But she had healed before that. She had healed in Marin's kitchen, at a plain table with her hands flat on the wood, and a decision forming in the quiet. She had healed in the first morning of her rented room, when she woke up, and the first feeling was not dread, but something lighter. She had healed at a Friday dinner table, in the back of a bread shop, laughing at a story she would not even be able to fully retell later. She had healed privately, carefully, entirely by herself. It was the most important thing she had ever done. And she had done it without anyone watching, without anyone to give her credit for it, without an audience for the difficulty of it. The way that the best things are done.